China, Russia, and North Korea are in panic mode. Because now the US is unleashing all its power in the Pacific. Missiles have been fired, strategic bombers have taken off, and silent submarines have moved deeper into the ocean. Aircraft carriers are advancing confidently. The balance of power has completely shifted, with American weapons at its core. Every missile, every bomber, and every warship has silenced China, Russia, and North Korea a little more. So, how did the US regain dominance in the Pacific and push countries like China, Russia, and North Korea into panic mode? It changed with a series of deliberate, clearly visible, but extremely calculated actions that demonstrated real equipment, real personnel, and real political will. With a single SM-6 fired off the coast of Australia, B-52s landing in Guam, and Virginia-class submarines slipping beneath the waves, the region realized that it would never return to the old Far East order. Let's take a look at the US's activities in Australia as a first step and see how the balance has shifted. For the first time outside its own territory, the US military fired an SM-6 missile from a Typhoon missile system directly at a maritime target in an allied country. The SM-6 destroyed its target in just a few seconds, but the real damage was strategic, not military. This launch was not just a military test, but a message that resonated across a wide geographical area, from China's coastal security to Russia's Pacific Fleet and North Korea's closed bases. Because Typhoon is a modern platform with multi-missile capabilities, high mobility, and integrated satellite targeting systems. To understand Australia's decision on Typhoon, one must first look at what the system offers. Typhoon is a truck-based launcher. It is built on a chassis that is longer than the classic HIMARS ramp. In its standard configuration, it can carry 4 Tomahawk UGM-109E Block 4 containers, or, instead of these containers, 2 SM-6 missiles. The US military actually uses the name mid-range capability, but the system is referred to as Typhoon in budget documents. The SM-6 on the ramp is a land-based version of Raytheon's air defense missile, which has long been used on Aegis destroyers. The guidance package is dual mode. Active semi-active radar in the first stage and K-band RF update in the terminal phase. Its range has been announced as 370 kilometers, but test flight records show it can reach up to 460 kilometers. It accelerates to around Mach 3.5 and, thanks to its 2-axis steering surfaces, can achieve 50 grams of thrust in the last second against a ballistic target. This profile is designed to strike China's DF-17 or Russia's Iskander-M-like hypersonic gliders as soon as they enter the target area. Additionally, Typhoon is capable of using both SM-6 and Tomahawk missiles. The Canberra government has designated an open training area adjacent to Robertson Barracks, located inland from Darwin Harbor, and Tyndall Air Force Base on the northern coast for Typhoon tests. During the first test in early summer 2025, a live warhead was not used. Nevertheless, an Australian Coast Guard helicopter, flying along the missile's flight path, successfully relayed radar reflections from the explosion site to the Jorn Early Warning Network, 320 kilometers away. The Canberra-Washington line avoids using the term preemptive strike in official correspondence, but in jointly prepared contingency plans, Tomahawk remains the first option for suppressing enemy air defense radars and opening an inland sea corridor without endangering civilian shipping. The Typhoon ramp can also launch Tomahawks, further expanding the operational scope. The Tomahawk Block 4 has a range of 1,600 kilometers. This system's range can be extended to cover China's southern naval bases, Russia's eastern waters, and North Korea's missile coastlines. This transforms the system into a hybrid platform capable of both air defense and attack. Low altitude, satellite updates, and the flexibility to change the intermediate target point come with it. Firing this missile from Australia would bring China's Yulin Naval Base on Hainan Island and the regional supply port of Zhangjiang within range. The US testing such a weapon in a continental-sized region like Australia, relatively close to China, signifies a shift from a defensive concept to a preemptive deterrence strategy. This is not merely a warning, but a demonstration of what the alternative could be. What the Pentagon showcased in this test was not the performance of firepower, but how deeply alliance networks can be integrated and which platforms can be deployed within these networks. When you factor in that Australia hosted the test, showing both infrastructure and political resolve, this move became not just a missile launch, but also a ballistic form of international messaging. For China, it was perceived as a move on a chessboard. The defense line has changed, pressure at the center has increased, and serious doubts have arisen that the next move will be around Taiwan. The fact that this system has been deployed in Australia is a direct challenge not only to China, but also to any authoritarian power seeking to exert influence in the Indo-Pacific basin. If you think that the US Typhoon missiles firing SM-6 missiles are the only thing China, Russia, and North Korea have to worry about, you are mistaken. This is because the US's Pacific plans also include keeping bomber aircraft on active duty in the region. When it comes to the Guam chess game, the bar is raised even higher. Guam may seem ordinary geographically, but the concrete runways and military hangars rising above it make it one of the most strategic military points in the world. Now, when you place two giant bomber aircraft such as the B-52 Stratofortress and B-2 Spirit on this island, it is no longer just a base, but a launch point for a strategic message. In July 2025, the U.S. Air Force redeployed these two platforms to Guam. This total deployment does not appear to be targeting regional crisis points, such as Iran, but rather seems to be directly aimed at China, Russia, and North Korea. This is because these three countries have been attempting to form a bloc against the U.S., not only militarily, but also politically, technologically, and ideologically in recent years. Therefore, the deployment of B-52s in Guam, with their 14,000-kilometer range and 32-ton bomb-carrying capacity, has become a multi-layered pressure tool beyond classic deterrence. The B-52H may now be the oldest aircraft in the U.S. inventory, but the sensor blocks inside its long fuselage were completely updated in the 2020s. The Block 3 retrofit program integrated the AN/APG-79 ESA radar, Link 16 tactical data link, and Lancer pods. This allows the bomber to target not only from ground control, but also from its own radar screen. Tomahawk-like AGM-158B JASSM-ER missiles have become standard for the B-52, with 6 under each wing and 7 in the internal bomb bay. A single sortie means 19 missiles in the air. The 6 aircraft stationed in Guam can carry 114 JASSM-ERs on a daily sortie, which is more than enough to target all of China's main radar installations in the East Sea Fleet at the same time. Similarly, the B-2 Spirit's radar invisible profile gives it the ability to carry out the first wave of attacks against any air defense system in the Pacific. These aircraft are not just fuselages and engines. Thanks to the air-to-ground missiles they carry, their nuclear warhead options, electronic warfare capabilities, and ability to target enemy communication systems, they are positioned as first response platforms in U.S. strategic doctrine. The B-2A Spirit is invisible to radar. At least, the digital signal processing capabilities of current Russian and Chinese ASA-equipped ship radars cannot detect the Spirit until it is 60 to 70 kilometers away. This is where what we call the first night reflex comes into play. B-2s can carry direct attack munition JDM or 2,000-pound GBU-57A-B MMOP bunker-busting bombs to sever enemy air defense networks in the first strike. The presence of B-2s in the Pacific puts nearly all of China's surface-to-air missile SAM batteries on high alert. This alert status leads to wear and tear over time, increased maintenance budgets, and most importantly, radar fatigue. As soon as the Spirit takes off, air defense centers in Beijing work through the night at full strength, just in case. This is how the psychological cost is calculated, and this deployment in Guam is more of a reminder to all three countries than a military exercise. The message is clear: your airspace no longer protects you. China's intentions toward Taiwan, Russia's rebuilding of its Pacific base network, and North Korea's nuclear tests were only the beginning of these three countries' efforts to destabilize the region. But the heavy bombing capacity in Guam is a reminder of how costly these intentions could be in practice. The U.S. move is not just about deploying an aircraft, but also about establishing an independent attack and defense center away from the mainland. This is a new doctrine in which maritime borders are drawn in the air. In the event of a crisis, the flight time to the target from the Pacific can be reduced to minutes rather than hours. For China, This is pressure that requires its radar networks to remain constantly on alert. For Russia, it is a new front that requires expanding its defense capabilities along its eastern coast. For North Korea, it is a nightmare of complete uncertainty, the fear of a first strike that could come at any moment, from anywhere. Therefore, the U.S. deployments on the island of Guam are not only a physical show of force, but also a redefinition of psychological deterrence. While China, Russia, and North Korea feel the presence of these bombers on their necks, there is another U.S. move they need to focus on: submarines. Underwater operations are quieter, but their results are more lasting. Virginia-class nuclear attack submarines, such as the USS Toledo, are the sharpest points of deterrence. One of the most notable deployments by the U.S. Navy in recent times was the Pacific Fleet's deployment of attack submarines to the Western Pacific. Although this move did not cause much of a stir in the public eye, it sent seismic waves through military circles. This is because these types of submarines are known for being as deadly as they are silent. They cannot be seen by radar, are difficult to detect by satellite, and by the time enemy submarines realize they have been spotted, it may be too late. Virginia-class submarines are nuclear-powered and can operate for 25 years without refueling. Their torpedo tubes are mainly for defense. Their real striking power comes from the Tomahawk missiles stored in vertical launch cells. The Block 5 wide-body segment, featured in the latest version of these boats, allows them to carry 40% more cruise missiles than previous versions. Deployed to Guam and around Hawaii, these submarines are equipped not only with conventional torpedoes, but also with Tomahawk-type long-range cruise missiles. The USS Toledo, USS New Hampshire, and USS Missouri, which are on duty in the Hawaii-Guam line, are each loaded with more than 40 Tomahawks. These missiles are capable of targeting numerous strategic objectives, ranging from China's naval facilities on Hainan Island to North Korea's nuclear facilities along the Sinpo coast. Furthermore, some classes are designed with covert operation capabilities to infiltrate special operations units from the sea. As part of their mission package, they receive target coordinate updates from the Joint Mission Planning Center in Guam, and then their own mission officer gives the missile launch command. There is no need for instant confirmation from the High Command. This reduces the response time for missile launches to minutes. If China or North Korea are detected preparing ballistic missile launchers, the chance of counter-salvos reaching their targets becomes debatable. The U.S.'s silent presence comes at a time when China has begun to treat the South China Sea as its own inland sea. Russia is showing signs of reviving its Pacific fleet, and North Korea is conducting ballistic missile tests from submarines. This shows that the Pentagon is responding in a planned and calculated manner. This is because submarines are excellent tools, not only in war, but also in preventing war. They keep the enemy on constant alert, force them to consume resources, and most importantly, establish asymmetric deterrence. At a time when China is boasting about the size of its navy, Russia is rebuilding military bases around Vladivostok, and North Korea is trying to acquire nuclear strike capabilities from the sea. The U.S. Shadow Fleet sends a clear message. The message that we can strike at any moment, from anywhere. But as long as we remain silent, you will never know where we are. Reinforces a very sharp deterrent. Now let's sift through all of the U.S.'s moves in the Pacific a little more and discover more clearly what the Far East Group is facing and what measures it has initiated. Washington's recent aggressive moves in the Indo-Pacific theater have been met with a firm resistance echoing behind the silence in Beijing. The launch of SM-6 missiles from Australia's Typhoon system and the landing of B-52 and B-2 bombers in Guam sounded a clear alarm bell in the Chinese Communist Party's Central Military Committee. The first concrete countermeasure came in mid-July 2025 with the simultaneous deployment of 2 Chinese aircraft carriers, Shandong and Fujian, in the Western Pacific for the first time. This move should be seen as a direct strategic response to the U.S.'s growing air and sea capabilities around the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea. In addition to its multiple exercises around Taiwan, China has activated new radar systems and air defense batteries on several artificial islands in the South China Sea. These steps are not merely a defensive reflex, but part of a geostrategic realignment aimed at counterbalancing the axis of power projection in the Western Pacific. But this realignment is not limited to Beijing. Moscow is also watching these developments with deep concern. Although Russia's eastern flank has traditionally been kept weak, the U.S. nuclear-capable aircraft in Guam have triggered Russia to refortify its Vladivostok region. The Russian Navy has deployed new coastal defense missile systems in Primorsky Krai, which borders the Sea of Japan. In particular, it has been reported that Bastion and Ball-type systems have been reactivated and radar scanning capabilities have been enhanced. These developments confirm Russia's serious capacity shortfall in its Far East defense, while also indicating a tendency to reposition its nuclear strategy toward the Pacific. Meanwhile, North Korea has not remained silent. Following the U.S. deployment of Typhoon and submarines, the Pyongyang regime conducted 3 separate medium-range ballistic missile tests by the summer of 2025. One of these crossed Japanese airspace and landed in the Pacific. These missile tests should be seen not only as a demonstration of technological capabilities, but also as symbolic yet dangerous responses to the U.S.'s 3-pronged encirclement strategy. In addition, North Korea has decided to accelerate its submarine-based ballistic missile program in coordination with China, and various intelligence claims that it has received technical advice from Russia have appeared in the international press. Thus, even if there is no direct military alliance between the 3 countries, a picture has emerged in which their strategic counter-reflexes are becoming increasingly synchronized. The U.S.'s offensive position and the responses of these 3 countries show that the Indo-Pacific region is no longer just a competition for naval power, but a scene of total military and psychological domination. In this new order, the depth of strategies, rather than the range of weapons, is becoming decisive. Uncertainties in the Pacific are also slowly beginning to clear up. Throughout history, geopolitical power projections have been shaped not only on the land masses of continents, but also in the depths of the seas and the skies. But the steps taken by the U.S. toward the Pacific in the summer of 2025 represent not only a military redeployment, but also a direct intervention in the global security architecture that emerged after the Cold War. The process, which began with the launch of SM-6 missiles from the Typhoon system on Allied territory, was completed with the deployment of nuclear-capable bombers and a submarine fleet in Guam. These moves signal a major shift in Washington's strategic doctrine, where deterrence is no longer measured solely by the size of deployed forces, but by their mobility, versatility, and integration with technology. For China, this means the beginning of an era in which not only the military buffer zones it has created around Taiwan, but also its mainland, could be directly targeted. Building artificial islands in the South China Sea or deploying ships in the Taiwan Strait is no longer sufficient to create deterrence, because the U.S. is encircling the region in a multidimensional manner from the air, underwater, and with long-range missiles. The situation is even more complicated for Russia. The historically weak military infrastructure of its Far Eastern territories makes the defensibility of these regions debatable. Although ports such as Vladivostok remain outside the focus of Western media, they are now included in the list of targets that can be reached at any moment by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Force and submarine threat. For North Korea, this scenario creates a potential panic zone for regime stability. Kim Jong-un's nuclear deterrence doctrine is becoming increasingly aggressive as he realizes that his regime could be vulnerable to sudden attacks from sea and air. This is turning the Asia-Pacific region into a full-blown nerve war. These 3 countries have one thing in common. Each of them now has to live with the new balance established by the U.S. in the Pacific. But this balance is not static. It is dynamic, oppressive, and constantly triggering. Moreover, the U.S. is not alone. Australia hosting Typhoon tests, Japan updating its BMD systems, South Korea increasing intelligence sharing, the Philippines allocating new bases, and even Taiwan accelerating its arms procurement processes. All of these developments indicate that the U.S. is not only increasing its own military presence in the Indo-Pacific, but also simultaneously elevating the war preparedness of its allies. For this reason, the summer of 2025 may be recorded by future strategists not merely as a calendar period, but as a turning point when Washington shifted gears in its Pacific doctrine. Now, the real question for the countries in the region is this. Is this new order delaying a conflict, or is it laying the groundwork for an inevitable showdown? The United States' actions leave this question unanswered, as strong deterrence also carries the potential for the greatest provocation. However, one thing is certain. The Pacific is no longer merely a trade route, a maritime corridor, or a stage for sovereignty claims. The Pacific is the new geopolitical pulse point of the 21st century. Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang are also trying to respond in kind to the US and its allies. But as the United States enters this race, it has declared that it is the leader in the Pacific, and that the security of the Pacific cannot be considered separately from that of the US. What do you think about this? We look forward to your comments. Thank you for watching.